To the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's start with public participation and recognition. And first up is acceptance. Public participation, acceptance of gifts and donations. And this is an action item. That the Board of Education accept with gratitude the donation of an additional 120 Chromebooks from Burlington Central School District 301 with an approximate value of $4,560. Do we have a motion?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Fred Davis?
Yes.
Jeff Albrecht?
Yes, with thanks.
Karen Willett?
Yes.
Victoria Newport?
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez?
Yes.
Howard Song?
Yes.
Next, we have recognition, Clinton Rosette Middle School 8th grade, student Riley Newport, and this is a recognition. The Board of Education congratulates Clinton Rosette Middle School 8th grader Riley Newport, who on Saturday, October 13th, won the IESA Class 2A State Cross Country Championship at Parkside Middle School in Normal, Illinois. Riley covered the 2-mile course in a time of 10 minutes and 36 seconds. Accumulating in an individually undefeated 2018 season, winning every single race all season long. As a result, he was also North Central Junior Conference champion, as well as Genoa Kingston sectional champion over the previous 2 weekends, where the CRMS team took 3rd place at both those meets.
I'm Kevin Beverly. I was Riley's coach. You can stand up. Go ahead. I was Riley's coach this year as well as the previous 2 seasons. Obviously, he's fast, and obviously he's been very, very successful. But what I like the most about coaching Riley over the past couple of years is his work ethic, his leadership skills, his leading by example on the course, the race course as well as off. And what he has contributed to the program is that the rest of the guys now have high expectations for themselves and each other. For the years to come. So he's one of Dekalb's finest, and I think we should all be real proud of him.
Congratulations, early speech.
Thanks, Coach. No, you can do it.
He's a smart kid.
Good job. Good job to you both. Thanks, Coach.
Next, we have public comment. Members of the public who wish to speak to the board should complete a request card prior to the meeting. This section of the meeting will be reserved for comments from the public. All comments should be limited to 3 minutes, and criticism of individuals is not in order. Do we have any cards tonight? Okay, thank you. Next, we have board committee reports and correspondence. Howard?
I had an opportunity to attend a community and diversity team meeting that I found to be useful, that many members of the community seem to have enjoyed hearing about, in particular about the dual language programs that were coming down the line, and asked very meaningful questions. And it went well. Those who organized it did quite well as well. Thank you.
Gary?
Yeah, Victoria, I have a question. We got an email earlier about FFAC not meeting on the 14th, I think it was originally scheduled. And I'm real curious, like, why not? I mean, we've got all these financial things going on, and what's happening?
Cindy, do you want to?
Honestly, there really weren't a lot of agenda items for that meeting date. There's a lot of stuff going on. We kind of wanted to get some clarity with some things first, so that when we meet in December, we can speak to those.
Yeah, that's the
There
part I
really
don't
wasn't a
get, Cindy. I mean, we're talking with these stiff guys, and we've got number of other things, the tax levy is, you're going to present tonight. I mean, there's a lot of financial stuff happening. And I thought we used that group as an advisory board to the school board before we get to a point of vote.
In our last meeting, we did cover quite a bit. We went over the summer projects, and have a recommendation coming back from FFAC on that. We talked about legislative issues going on. We covered a lot. And really, there wasn't any changes before, from our past meeting that we had in October to this meeting. So to convene everybody it didn't seem like it was a good use of time. And I hear what you're saying, but when we looked at the agenda, it was very small.
It surprises me. I mean, even in the next meeting, we'll be voting on things that are very much in line with what the FFAC would do. Some of them, I haven't heard their input.
And that does move it back. In other words, FFAC's part of that then moves it back another month after that, or at least another 2 weeks after that. I mean, their recommendations or their feelings about the things that we're doing moves it back from their meeting in December to our last meeting in December or first part of January. So it does move it back significantly because we have to get their feedback. So I feel the same way you do.
Anything else?
I do have one thing, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just would like to recognize and thank the DHS. We had Richard Jenkins in while he was in town. He took the time to meet with students, both in small groups and large group, and it was just a wonderful morning. It was, and for those kids, especially the kids who are interested in pursuing an acting career, what an unbelievable opportunity to spend 30 minutes with somebody like Richard Jenkins. And also thank you to NIU and the DHS staff for hosting a large group of Chinese educators, which was a really neat experience. James and I had the opportunity to have an exchange with that group and learn from each other. It was a neat morning.
I did get some more dates from Dr. Cohen regarding our diversity training, our board diversity training. I had Melissa send out these dates prior to the meeting, so hopefully tonight I can get a response from everybody on the board on what days they are available. The first date is Wednesday, January 9th, and it goes from 6 to 8, and the next one is Thursday, January 10th, which is also 6 to 8 in the evening. So he did give me some days, times also on those 2 dates during the day, but I'm not sure that that's possible for everybody to make. So
I thought the email said 6 to 9.
it says 6 to 8.
Is it 6 to 8? Okay.
So if everybody could let me know which date right now works, that would be great, so I can call him back and get that booked. Bill, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm open to either.
Either, okay? Either, okay?
I don't know.
Okay. You could get back to Melissa this week, that would be great. Either one, okay? All right, thank you. And I went either also, so we now have the responses and we'll get that date set.
Is this something that's required in policy?
I can't answer that.
I can't particularly schedule that far out, but I mean, like we're required, for instance, to report child abuse. I mean, there are some things that elected officials are required to do by state law. I wonder whether this is something that we're required to do under our own policy, board policy, or by an administrative statute or state law. It's so new to us.
Anything beyond board policy, I would say no. Board policy, I'll check.
What is your concern exactly?
Well, I think that my concern is it's really a matter of trying to understand what a board member responsibility is as an elected official. An elected official has certain responsibilities under law, and then we can add responsibilities under our own board policy, which we then agree to.
It was contained within the diversity plan, which we approved.
Yeah, but
So by approving the plan, we tacitly agreed to go along with it, whether it's policy or not.
I'm just
So that would answer that question, would it not? I mean, in other words, if we agreed to this particular thing by a vote, then certain conditions would be things that are part of the agreement, correct? Which is this training. So,
Victoria, but my question also, I mean, Carrie, you know, Fred, Howard, and Rick's seats are, you know, coming open, right, for election in April. So would it be in our best interest to potentially maybe even move that so that the new board members that are seated take place with that, or are we going to have a whole new one? You know what I mean? I guess that just brought up another point I hadn't even considered.
Yeah, I was thinking about that with the election coming up.
Because it's only 3-4 months away from that date.
Yeah, that's right.
It is true. Well, I guess, do we want to move it to after the elections? I mean, I guess that's the
would
conversation
that
we
be
need to have.
consensus?
Okay.
To move it back?
I think it makes it for a cleaner implementation.
Those
If we do
who
that.
will be elected will be those who have to live with the policy
Exactly.
and the plan, so it makes sense to me that they'll be back to the election.
Bill, are you okay with that?
Yeah, okay.
I am.
Okay, so I'll go back to Dr. Cohen.
Look for some June dates.
I'll get some May, June dates for us.
Right, that'll be June.
And come back. Okay.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Okay, next we have presentations, intergovernmental agreement relating to tax increment financing districts. And this is an informational item.
Thank you. You have before you an intergovernmental agreement which resolves the matter with the city of Dekalb with regard to the transfers of funds from their administrative, from the TIF to their administrative general fund for administrative fees. I'm recommending to the board that they approve it. I feel it's the best deal in the best interest of the taxpayers. The basic terms of the agreement, just coming from a high level, is that the city will continue to make surplus distributions from TIF 1 as they've existed in the, out of the existing IGA since 2011. The city will distribute from this intergovernmental agreement $11.25 million from the TIF that's currently in their surplus. But for the school district, that roughly amounts to a little over $6.7 million, give or take. This is to kind of resolve any questions that are out there. So there is some standard waiver and release language in there from anything from this point forward back that we're waiving and releasing the city from anything that they may have done. That release applies to all the taxing bodies that have signed the intergovernmental agreement, but since the county also has within it the state's attorney, it does not bind the state's attorney or attorney general, obviously, from any obligations they feel they have to look into things any further. There's a greater degree of TIF reporting disclosures that we've put into place go forward. So as TIF 3 progresses, there'll be additional disclosure requirements and there'll be more frequent meetings with the Joint Review Board, which I think lends itself to kind of a healthy relationship go forward and make sure the TIF dollars, everybody understands where the TIF dollars are going and how they're being spent. And out of TIF 3, there's an agreement that there'll be distributions of surplus beginning at the level of 30% in fiscal year 22, increasing to 50% for the fiscal year 26 thereafter. So those are the basic terms. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but based on those terms, again, I think it's a good deal for the taxpayers, more than ultimately the local taxing districts would receive. I feel that if we didn't enter into these agreements.
I have a question. I guess it's curiosity. I'm not sure if it has substance. And that is, I noticed Kishwaukee College is among the ones who've been discussing this and is affected apparently by the distribution. What about, and I also noticed that the DeKalb Township is also amongst the ones discussing this. What about Malta Township and Cortland Township as two townships, for instance, that fit into the district? I wondered why there were or were not. I really don't know who all is on the working group or has been involved in discussions, but what's your point of view on that?
Well, I wasn't, it depends on whether they're a taxing district within the TIF boundary itself. So Malta Township isn't a member of the Joint Review Board. So I would imagine Malta Township doesn't extend to the TIF district itself. So they're not party to the agreement. If I was the city, I'd want to make sure every potential party here that's a taxing authority within the district should be included. If it's not, it's really to their detriment, not ours at this point.
What drives me to ask the question, I guess, and I've said this many times in the past, coming from Malta, and I mean, there may be people from Cortland would say the same thing, I don't know, but when a TIF occurs in a particular community and a school district overlaps that community and several others, then that community that has the TIF has the power essentially to raise taxes for not only itself, but also those other communities that aren't in the TIF and won't see benefit from the TIF. So the school district has a certain need for revenue, and it's brought in by taxation within the footprint of the district. But when the city can say, well, we're going to have a TIF and we're going to set aside, that tax money, that EAV tax money, in this footprint of this TIF within our municipality, that in effect can cause the tax rate to go up across the district, not just in the city that's offering the TIF. So that's always been a problem for me in principle, that, there's the potential, or not, it's usually reality, and when the TIF happens, that the taxes in the district will go up across the district, not just in the footprint of the TIF or in the municipality. So that's kind of what was driving my question about participation in the GRB or in the agreement in general. Again, there's nothing in that I see that makes whole or has potential to make whole Malta or Cortland in this immediate case.
Well, what does help is that to the extent Malta or Cortland overlap with the school district's boundaries, if they do, then the benefit is here we're getting dollars that we wouldn't otherwise get, so it does give some indirect tax relief for them, because we'll be receiving those dollars that we otherwise wouldn't.
Yes, so this particular agreement does can accomplish.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Where, the TIF law is what it is, and you're correct that you look strictly and you ignore the but-for issue, right? The but-for the TIF, we wouldn't have had this development. If you ignore that, you're right, mathematically, it does put pressure on those areas that are outside the city that have overlapping taxing districts, because they still have a need for EAD dollars.
And to make the matter worse, to compound it, and my gripe is with the TIF Act, is with how it's written. If the TIF is successful and if business is developed and exceeds the normal economic base within that city or that village or town or whatever the entity is, then that may well draw business away from the adjacent communities. So it's a double whammy in some ways.
Other questions?
Thank you.
Yes, I have a statement. Appreciate, my point of view, appreciate all the work that you put into this, and we've had many discussions about this, and it's not just something that it's dropping off the turnip truck. This is something that we've been working on. You particularly have been working awfully hard at making happen, and this is the agreement that we're talking about is one that has been under careful consideration for a long period. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. I mean, if it wasn't really for the school district, then kind of identifying this matter, together we as a group, Jamie, myself, and Cindy identified this, we wouldn't be talking about this distribution of dollars to the taxing bodies today.
And to Jamie's credit, Cindy's credit.
Yeah, many people worked hard on this, and as intergovernmental agreements go, this is quite amazing if you can pull everybody together, all these different entities. It's huge.
Yeah. Almost never happens.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So do I have a consensus to bring back the proposed intergovernmental agreement relating to tax increment financing districts?
Yes.
Next, we have District 428 Student Performance Data Snapshot, and this is a discussion informational presentation. Dr. Amy Luckner.
Good evening. The purpose of this presentation is to really review, in a snapshot kind of way, our student performance data. We like to come to the board every year to kind of give you an update based on the assessments that we have on how our students are doing. This year, then we'll also talk a little bit at the end about how that relates to the ESSA designations. But the overall purpose here is kind of a broad picture of our performance data in really kind of a snapshot form. Let's go back one. So given that, what are some ways in which we evaluate our student performance? There are a lot of different ways that we might do that, and ESSA has kind of broadened that for us. What we're going to focus on today really are some of the academic indicators as well as educational attainment. We know that's really only one piece of the whole child. So there's many other things that we will hopefully get a chance to share with you at a later time. But today what we're going to focus on are those reading and math skills as well as science data that we have now as well, and some educational attainment data as well. So we're going to follow first along our reading data. So how are our students doing with their pre-literacy and literacy skills? Kind of, well, really what we have here is K through 12, or 11 actually. So looking at pre-literacy, one of the main indicators is letter sound fluency. How many letter sounds can a kindergarten student share with us or read in a minute is what this captures for us. It's an indicator of readiness for reading, and it has kind of a strong correlation with subsequent reading skills. What we'll see on here is the kind of the bottom part of each column, that green part, is the percent of students who in the fall, when they come to us, demonstrate an established level of letter sound fluency. And the way that that is defined here with our AIMSweb data is they're at the 50th percentile nationally or higher. So those students come in the fall with an established level. The arrow above that is the change in the percent of students who have that established level from fall to spring. So for example, in 2018, which is that last column, we started out with 34% of our kindergarten students having an established level of letter sound fluency. And then by the end of the year, we had 58% of our students at an established level. Two things I want to point out here that I think are worth noting. One is that you'll see across time, right, the pattern that we see from 2016, 2017 to 2018 is that there's a decrease in the percent of students who in the fall of their kindergarten year are showing us an established level of letter sound fluency. We also, though, have kind of the arrows are getting bigger, right? An increase in the number of students that we're able to add to the percent across the year. But overall, we do see both those things happening. Then we come to our oral reading fluency. Again, this is just a snapshot of our students' reading skills. Here, we have each kind of grade level separately. And we have the fall data as well as the change. The arrow is the change from fall to spring in that year, that academic year. So you'll see there's kind of a mix here of both kind of the starting level of the percent of students who start out the year at an established level of oral reading fluency, as well as the change across the year from fall to spring. You can look at this across with a cohort as well. So if we, for example, we're going to look at the 2016 data in the fall. Bold eyes here. We see that we have 42% 2016 in the fall, first grade. And then 2017, they'd be in second grade. So that's 38%. And then 2018, they'd be in third grade, which is 45%. So you can follow a cohort across time as well. But you'll see it's just kind of variable across the years. We also, of course, are interested in our reading skills for our students who are in our bilingual program. So this is Spanish oral reading fluency. It's a little bit different because as Amy would tell us, that when students are reading to learn Spanish, it's a transparent language, and so doesn't have any. It's a little bit easier for students to pick up fluency without necessarily picking up the comprehension as well. So it's not always the best indicator, but it's one piece of information that we have. And you can see kind of students' Spanish reading fluency across time with our students as well. We have, we dig in deeper a little bit with our MAP data, measures of academic progress. And one of the goals of MAP data is to really show student growth across time. What you'll see here, what the important part to look at is the diamond. Is that a diamond or side diamond? Kind of the gold diamond is the amount of growth that we would expect kids to make if they're going to continue making the typical growth for that grade level. The blue bar is our average growth for our district for that grade level. Sometimes I wish the screen was, I could screen here. So basically what you'll see here, so for example, from across time for our second grade students, we are closing that distance between the amount of growth we have and the amount of growth that we want. So between the blue bar and that yellow diamond, so we are getting closer.
If you move closer to there, it kind
Yeah,
of gives me an indication of what you're talking about.
Yes, definitely. I much prefer to be able to
There's a
touch.
lot of information on each.
I'm sorry,
No.
it's
No, it's totally fine.
inscrutable to me.
I'm more of a hands-on person anyway.
Yeah, good.
So this is a great example here in fifth grade. You'll see here, this is the amount of growth that we would want to have to make, if our fifth graders were kind of growing as they should across fifth grade. So we didn't quite make it this first year, but the second year and this third year, last year, we made that growth and we overshot it, which means we're closing the gap for our students because they grew even more than typical fifth graders grow. And so they're closing that gap between where they are and kind of where maybe others are nationally.
And Amy?
Yeah.
Just to point out, this is a nationally normed growth assessment.
So the first one is
The whole thing is nationally normed. So the diamonds.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's perfect.
Technology work.
Yeah.
The diamonds are the nationally normed levels of expected growth.
So here we have another situation, just because it's just data here. So in sixth grade, right, we see a different pattern of data where we see that this gap here is increasing. So that is a grade level that we've been looking more intensely at to see what we might need to change for that grade level.
So the third bar of that is what the measure of what we actually did. The first bar is what we should have or what we expected to do. Is that correct?
You're getting close. So these are different academic years.
Right.
So this was last year. So this is the bar of what we did. This is our goal of what we wanted to do.
Okay.
So we get really excited when we surpass our goal here. And then this data also tell us when we need to start looking very closely at our curriculum in a certain grade level.
And those first four, apparently we exceeded our expectations or exceeded our goal. Is that correct? The first group, 1, 2, 3, of groups of 3?
Yeah, so
I'm sorry, I didn't have time to get home and get my computer.
No, so this is second grade here for the past 3 years. We still are below the goal, but we're getting closer.
Okay.
This is third grade the past 3 years, and we see a similar story.
Right.
Right, we're getting closer to the goal. Fourth grade as well, we have a little dip, but we're getting very close here to our goal. Fifth grade, we were kind of had a plateau there, and then we overshot the goal last year. Sixth grade, we already talked about. Seventh grade, we were over our goal in 2016, and then we have kind of a decrease here. And then eighth grade, we have a random decrease, but overall, we usually do a pretty good job of exceeding our goal in eighth grade. And then ninth grade, we're getting closer here as well to getting to our goal. Now, these are not cohorts. This is, the fifth grade class in 2016, the fifth grade class in 2017, and the fifth grade class in 2018.
Thank you for explaining that.
Of course, yeah, I'm sure you're not the only person who was wondering. So that's some of the patterns we see with our reading data in math. These are our PARC data. So we're moving here now. we first had some of our district data, our district assessments. Now these are our state assessments that everyone in the state takes. Right? And so here what the state is looking at, one thing they're looking at is the percent of our students who are meeting or exceeding expectations. Right, so there are 4 or 5 on PARC if you are someone who gets a PARC report at home. Again, we have for each grade level the past 3 years of data. And what we see is these are the percent of our students who meet or exceed PARC expectations.
I
Yeah,
have a question though. So and maybe you can touch on this. I don't want to interrupt your PowerPoint.
No, please do.
But I mean, as we see, this is a factor that affects obviously the ratings and the tier support. I mean, the tier levels that we're placed in. So as you can see, and I know Victoria, you had a question about ESSA and how the tiers are the information is given out to what tier each school falls upon. But as you see, we've moved and we've shifted our instructional practices to reflect the Common Core curriculum. But as we're seeing, instead of seeing results that are supportive of what we're doing in the classroom, we're actually seeing a decline. So how can you explain that?
well, it is, and I think you can see this and say, well, we see a pretty clear pattern, right? If we're looking the first bar for every grade level is from 2016, 2017, 2018, and that we see kind of a pattern here where we're declining across time, and that can be very discouraging, right? Because we said we've been working very hard on best practice in our instructional practices and in our curriculum. The one kind of difference here is with 7th grade, we're seeing kind of a small increase over time. There are a couple of different factors that we've been discussing with this PARC data. One is that really thinking about testing conditions with PARC data. What are we doing to make sure that students are able and to do their best performance? What are we communicating to students and families about the importance of PARC, things like that. So that's one possible piece of it. The other piece of it, I think, is even thinking about what do we know, how does not our curriculum necessarily, because our curriculum is aligned with the Common Core state standards, but are there pieces that we need to present in a different way, or how are we preparing our students for the kinds of questions they're going to get on PARC? Not that we would ever want to teach to the test, but for example, Vicki and I have been looking pretty closely at some of the PARC reports, break it down by standard, and one thing that we noticed was just the ways in which the writing prompts are asked, the questions are asked, are very different in the ways in which we sometimes instruct our students. So thinking about the match there, they get the same standards, but in a different way. I don't know if you want to add to that at all, Vicki, or it's just one example of
right. And this was just preliminary, and I, like we didn't have anything else to do during the winter, but we went into the PARC data from the last 2 years, so it wouldn't have included that last column. And we looked pretty hard at the writing piece and the way in which the students are asked to perform writing on the PARC test. We haven't really prepared them for that type of format. So we know that our students are growing in writing, but it's not showing up in that format. So we're going to have to rethink in terms of how we prepare our students to better demonstrate their writing skills, but in that type of format. The other thing we saw was a trend is when we particularly broke down the reading standards, and PARC allows you to do this. We started to look for patterns in terms of what skills our students consistently way off from, and we started to see some pattern in terms of informational text, which would be reading across the curriculum, particularly when it relates to science and social studies, and also in the reading of literature part of the being able to cite with text to support. And so, but then there were other areas that we saw where our students were actually pretty close in terms of where the benchmark was. So as we move forward and now having 3 years of data, we're going to go back and do the same type of analysis. And then, as Amy said, not teach to the test. We don't want to do that. But if we want to be sure that we're portraying and giving our students the opportunity to portray what they know, plus making shifts in our curriculum to make sure that they really have the skills that they need. Those are the kinds of adjustments that we're making.
Wow. I'm having a really hard time with this. I teach, but I'm having a really hard time with this. This all sounds to me like exterior things that you are, things, in other words, that you can change that are coming at you from outside. It doesn't sound like, to me, unless I'm mishearing this, that it's not coming from inside. In other words, are we teaching in the correct way to address these issues? Instead of saying, okay, teaching to the test, I got that part that's coming from outside. The inside is our teaching rubric or our methodology. Is there something, have we been analyzing our methodology that would cause these numbers to go up? Have we been doing it from the inside instead of saying, well, it rained on the game that day, we didn't do very well for rain, and we haven't been training for rain, or any number of other exterior or external elements? Have we been analyzing our methodologies internally to say we need to change the internals?
Right.
Here?
So part of it is.
Sorry.
No, it's a great question. So that's definitely been part of the conversation. In a lot of
This doesn't look
different
good.
ways. No.
It's bad.
Now, let me address that question first. So, keep in mind that state assessment for 3 through 8 is changing this year as well. So that's going to be part of the factors moving forward. However, so if we, I don't know if I can go, can you click back one? Sure. So an example of that is also so when we, for example, when we notice the pattern with our 6th grade data for math and the student growth data, so we've been working with the curriculum teams to look at the instructional practices. What are they doing in the classroom to meet the standards? So beyond kind of what's the curriculum, but how are you delivering the curriculum? What are the strategies you're using? And they've been working on changing that all last year, I believe.
All last year and this year. We've been working very closely with instructional coaches and really identifying what practices they're going to let go of and what practices they need to embrace to specifically address the lack of growth in reading in 6th grade.
Which is what you were which was what I was talking about.
Right.
You're now talking about that issue.
Right.
What we kind of call, I try not to refer to as pedagogy.
No.
We're talking about the methodology by which you teach in order to make people understand what it is they need to know.
Right.
Correct?
But he hadn't done that as systematically with PARC. We've been doing it with math.
That's a state mandated, right?
Right, but PARC, this one here.
What does that stand for?
What does it stand for?
Oh, gosh.
I'm so sorry to ask the question.
No, I used to know
Performance,
readiness. Transfer.
I'm sorry?
Oh, Jenny got it. Performance assessment, for readiness for college and career.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I repressed it now.
That makes it much clearer.
So the question to Vicky, I know we do, but I
I'm
still,
sorry.
Vicky, and I know that this is the rule, but I still want to know this, right? So Vicky and Kim, do you go into the classrooms and see what the teachers are actually teaching? Look back and see what other ways and work directly with the instructional coaches because they might be very limited as well.
The way we do it, so like there's a disconnect when you look at our math. Go back up to the math one. We're making some nice progress because we've been working. So there's a disconnect I'm seeing right now between the math and the PARC results. Because on my math results are showing we're making some growth. PARC is showing the opposite. PARC is a 7-hour test. Math's not a 7-hour test. So, there's different figures there. But that's what our curriculum teams do. We look at the data, and like our big push this last 2 years has been guided reading. We can see our kids need more individualized instruction. So we've been hitting that very hard and guided math very hard. Then we also noticed our word work needed strengthening. So we started that program last year, Words Their Way. So yes, and we have been talking about the fact that we're working more on how we're delivering it, working on student engagement because our students have changed, their needs have changed. That's what we're trying to hit hard right now is engaging them. So yes, that's kind of what we have to keep doing that. And that's what we do. And then we have a curriculum team for each subject area, but obviously ELA and math spend the most time going through their data and trying to figure out why it's not looking that good.
And I've noticed that our attitude, my observations, the attitude towards learning is completely different, or really moving in a different direction, kind of out of control in a different direction as far as how they receive information, process information, and then give it back, right? I mean, it's very, very different. I'm just wondering if we're keeping up with that dynamic. And I imagine from what you're saying, we are certainly with math, we're able to kind of do that.
Well, and a large part of this is the role that our instructional coaches play. Is to be realistic and honest with you, Val. Kim and I do get into the buildings, we do get into classrooms, but we don't get in as much as we would like to. But our instructional coaches who sit in on all the data teams and have the working relationships with these teachers, they work with the data, and then they work with these teams of teachers and help guide them and really equip them with better approaches of delivery and instruction, and give them that support and feedback that they really need.
Through observation. I mean, so through sitting in and then saying, here's what you might try, and the instructional coaches are to the teachers, helping the teachers do change things around with it. Okay, well, thank you.
They're valuable.
Yeah, sorry.
You wanna go back
Thanks
to
very
Barb?
much.
Yeah. We can go to the next slide. The other information that we have moving into our high school years is the PSAT that we've taken for the past 2 years, as well as the SAT data. Now, the PSAT last year and the year before, we did for 9th and 10th graders. And so you'll see here that for ERW, which is evidence-based reading and writing, we had, in the school year 2017, we had 67% of our students meet the College Board benchmark. And then those students went on into PSAT 10, and 57% of them met the College Board benchmark. Now, note that the assessment was in the spring in 2017, and then it was in the fall for the school year 2018. So part of that drop is just simply because of that. Now, then we have our 9th graders. Last year, they had 56% of students meet their College Board proficiency level, and then we'll see they'll take the PSAT 10 this year. Yeah, go ahead and go on. So SAT is our state mandated test for high school. And what you see here is for both, we have done 2 years now, 2017 and 2018. You'll see 2 different bars. And the reason for that is that our data look different depending on which one you're looking at. So according to the state, in 2017, 40.8% of our students, that's the orange bar, were proficient. And then last year, 32% of our juniors were proficient. So we saw a slight drop there as well. The state levels for proficiency are much more rigorous than the College Board levels. The blue is what College Board has decided is what you would need to be proficient in college. That says you are college ready. So based on their research, College Board benchmarks say that 66% of our students are proficient in 2017, and about 60% of our students are proficient in 2018.
So to restate that, the state of Illinois set the benchmarks much higher than the College Board did. So, SAT has College Board benchmarks. We had 65%, 50, or 60%, 59% met the College Board. The state obviously has theirs higher, so our numbers are much different at 40 and 32%.
The state average is that gray circle. So you see we were right at the state average here. in 2017 and a little below in 2018.
Disturbing to me is that it goes down 20% in the year from 17 to, I mean, that one, the blue does not. This one, we went down, it looks like,
Yeah, about 8% there.
well, 8%, I'm talking total, I mean, from the amount it is, it went down 8%, but we reduced it by 20. I mean, it went down 20% as far as, I mean, the number, the 8%, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, of the total, of the whole, yeah.
20% reduction.
And it's
That's
so,
significant.
No, we're misreading that. First of all, it's two different testing groups. It's the class of 17 and then the class of 18. So the class of 17, according to the Illinois state standards, 48% are college ready.
Got it.
In the class of 2018, a different testing group, according to the state, it's 32% met the state's benchmark. If we go by the College Board's benchmark in 2018, 60% of our students met the benchmark.
I got that.
So it isn't that they dropped, it's that, yeah, we're dealing with two different sets of standards, whether you talk about the College Board or the state.
yeah.
And what colleges will go by is the blue, not the red. So
I think what you're pointing out, Jeff, is not only do we have, if we just look at the orange, which is what the state is interested in, right, we do have a drop there. And although the drop itself, I think your point is about 8%, when you look at how much of this total, is drop, is 20% of that.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think that's what
It's a
you're pointing.
reduction, a significant reduction. And I'm just talking about it, I mean, from the orange part, again, sorry for this detail, but this is what we do. I mean, the state is looking at it for giving us that money, or the money that we are qualified for from the state. They look at that number. They don't look at the blue number. I mean, they may look at the blue number, but they certainly look at the orange number.
And
right?
part of the way that the state has, like jumping a little ahead a little bit here in terms of how they're using these data for ESSA designations, is they look at the distance between where we're at and their target for us, and their target includes the state average. So they do consider the fact that although this is a low number, it's about at the state average. Here, they would look more at the distance between kind of where we're at in the state average, and so that our score would be lower when they start to look at it for ESSA purposes. The other piece that so this is not just this is similar to our PARCC data that we're seeing, right? We're seeing this pattern across time that brings up the questions, the exact important questions that you guys are asking, right? For time, I'm going to move ahead and we'll come back if we have more questions. Yep. So for math data, this is early math, early numeracy data, number identification. So those are the pieces of the percent of students, who are established at the beginning of the year, and then by the spring, the additional percent of students who are demonstrating established level of skills. And then go ahead. We have math computation. Sorry, if you go back. Let's get up a little bit. Here, again, we have for each grade level, the percent of students that were established at the beginning of the year, and then the growth from beginning to end of the year. The kind of pattern that we see here is we have some pretty strong growth across the year for 4th grade and 5th grade. Especially, that pattern is pretty stable for the past 3 years where we've seen that growth.
Amy,
Yeah.
in a couple of these things, I'm seeing the arrows pointing downward.
Mhm.
Does that indicate that we're actually seeing shrinkage rather than growth?
So part of it is that to be established in the fall, you have to have, let's say, for an example, let's say 10 points. And then to be established or to continue to be at that established level in the spring, let's say you have to have 20 points. So the cutoff for being established grows across the year. So you could have students who start out being established, but then they don't grow enough to continue being established across the year. So the cutoff changes across the year because everybody is growing. And so this means that we had fewer students who were at the established level in the spring than in the fall because of that reason. Okay, go ahead. Here are the data for math. Again, this is our internal district data that show how our students are growing in kind of a comprehensive math skills across the years, past 3 years. We see kind of some similar patterns that we saw to reading, where we see more growth. Our goal is still up here, so we're getting closer, but not quite reaching that here in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. In 5th grade, we're reaching that goal. 6th grade, again, we talked about 6th grade. We saw similar declines in math as we saw in ELA, so there's been some pretty intense discussions about that. 7th grade, yeah, we are continually meeting or exceeding our goal for math. 8th grade, we had a slight dip, but we're back up on track. 9th grade, we changed the test this year, so to be algebra specific. So we'll move on from that for right now. Okay. Part data for math, we see some similar concerns as we did for reading. The other thing I want to point out here too is that this is the percent of students who are proficient, so it means they meet or exceed. What this doesn't capture are the number of students we have that are approaching. Right? There are students who are very close to meeting or exceeding, but because they don't hit that one benchmark, they're not included here. It also doesn't capture the growth piece. And ESSA does include growth, not just, it includes 2 pieces of PARC. One is growth from year to year, and then the other one is the kind of proficiency level, which is what this is showing. So I'm just going to kind of skim over the patterns, if that's okay. So we'll see, we see some decreases here in terms of proficiency. Some of those decreases are matched at the state level. Those boxes are the state average, but we're below that as well.
Well, we seem to be moving down in a couple of years anyway, at least several. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We're moving it down on year by year.
Right, we're certainly, so we're seeing, now we see a couple trends where we moved down and came back up a little bit, but we are seeing kind of increasing, or rather decreasing, percentages of students who are proficient, according to PARC.
So like in 5th grade, you've got that dip in the center right there in 2017,
Yeah.
and so does the state. That's interesting to me.
Yes, so I don't know what it was about the assessment that year, if that matched, but that does match here, right? We just wish that it matched up here. So.
Several years ago, when PARC was first introduced, there were many questions about its validity as a measurement tool.
Mm-hmm.
Has it changed to the point where we can use this data, or is PARC in general something that we just hope is going to go away in 2 years so that we can use something more accurate?
Right.
Well, we can hope. I'm sorry to interrupt, Amy. We can hope, but I don't think that's going to happen because the state has purchased the right to use the PARC questions. So PARC-like assessments are going to be here for a while. To the validity question, we can question that. And part of the issue is, I mean, obviously our test results are not where we want them to be. They're not close. However, for students, especially when you start getting into the middle school grades, they're legitimately asking, why am I taking this? What's in this for me? We're sitting for these extensive exams, and why? Am I being graded on this? And how am I being assessed on this? And obviously, when we get to the sophomores and juniors, when they're sitting for the PSAT, and they know it's a practice SAT, especially for those that are self-identified college-bound students, that they know that assessment means something. Even for them, yeah, it's, but Clearly, and I'm not making excuses, clearly we have our work cut out for us.
So you're seeing, particularly at middle school grades, something of a motivational issue.
Sure.
It's understandable. Thank you.
Pardon me, I've sat through these kind of discussions in private industry where people are showing sales projections, charts on sales projections. And then ultimately, always, the question is, don't like the way that's moving. How are we going to move that particular projection upward, right? Obviously, we're in a different situation in the school district, but my question to you is, obviously, we are all interested in moving that upwards, and Jamie, you brought up an issue of, and Howard, you echoed that, motivation. So we have to, it seems to me that if we're stuck with the park thing, right? Pardon me, state. But if we're stuck with this stupid park thing, we have to deal with it, right? I mean, we can't make it go away, so we have to deal with it in some fashion. And are we addressing, you say we don't want to deal with teaching to the test.
Right.
Well, we hopefully got away from that somewhat, but, I mean, in some ways, we're gonna have to do that, because they're starting to rate us on our performance. I mean, the state is starting to say, okay, now we're looking at your performance, and we have to, and I know they have been.
There are multiple factors to assess.
Yeah, and that really is a whole nother presentation.
I get that. I mean,
We're
this is
talking
like,
about school
this
quality
could go on
indicators
till
and
midnight.
academic. Well, this could be a meeting in of itself. I mean, it truly could, because as Amy said in the beginning, we're touching on just a small part of what we do with children. But to your point, what we need to focus on is the growth piece. Are we moving children? Because not every child in first grade and kindergarten and third grade is in the same place. So we have to take every child at where they're at, and then we have to assess whether or not they're making a year's worth of growth in math and in reading, because that's the goal, that they're moving on. And some children, we need to move them more than a year. But in there's, that is the challenge.
We're getting new people every year.
And we're a high mobility district.
High mobility makes for a lot of difference on it.
But you just brought up a really good point, Jamie, and I hope that this is answered somehow, some way. And I don't know if you're going to give a presentation on the ratings of ESSA, but it is at the end of this PowerPoint. And my question to you is exactly, so you understand that we do have to show growth, and we obviously haven't showed growth for those underperforming and the lowest performing school at Tyler. So what implementations and what are we going to gain from all this data? What is the goal ultimately? Because if we can't really look at it and say that that's something that we can look at with validity and with fidelity, and say that this is really realistically what's happening in our schools as a board, we're not in the buildings on a day-to-day basis. So what are you going to do to show us as a board what's the next step, especially for the alarming Tyler Elementary School, right? When we have that rating, people don't understand that they're a great educator in those buildings possibly, right? And every other building. So my question to you, I think it's alarming to see that. And surely as an educator, I know Park isn't a reliable source per se, right? But it is an indication that maybe something is going on.
It is
And so we have to
a piece of
address
data,
that.
absolutely. To answer your question, what are we going to do? That's a different presentation, right? To come back and say, now this is the plan. I mean, we've identified that we have data that's trending in the wrong direction. And now it's, okay, how are we going to get it stopped and get it trending in the right direction?
And part of the opportunity that our buildings have with the essay ratings is that that's precisely what the state is asking us to do, right? Is for each building that's identified to create a plan using the Illinois Quality Frameworks, identify how they're going to move the needle, and then they have funds to help support that process. It's a year-long planning process, at least, well, it's just in the beginning stages of the planning, but those will be part of what's coming up.
And why don't we jump to, we brought up at the end of the presentation that we have the tier ratings. Let's jump to that so we can wrap this up.
Yes, it's like so much information. But I want to say something very often, that this is a huge part of what this board does. I mean, a lot of times we get wound up with TIP and wound up with other stuff, and
But at
we,
the end, it's about the kids.
teaching our kids is what we are about, and I know that we're all committed to that, and so we have a huge part. I don't mean to get on a platform here, but I mean, this is really important stuff.
Well, it's kind of our purpose.
Yeah.
That's why we're here. That's why we
We
exist.
had talked too about whether, and I don't know as much as maybe as I should about board policy, but it's almost like a workshop that we need, you know, if people would be interested, if you really want to like look at the actual ESSA data, there's reports that we could dig into. It's beyond the scope, I think, of a meeting here, but it would definitely be something I would be very happy to support or provide.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, I think, again, we kind of are at such a high level right now.
Right.
This is really heavy data.
This thing about growth bothers me.
Yeah.
All right,
What do you
it's
mean
a
by growth?
measurement. But I understand that that's how to some degree now, that's how districts are going to be rated by the state. I get that. I understand that we have kids that are having difficulty learning and that growth is important. If we can show they're having growth, that's a good thing. And I looked up there at our mission statement, right, you know, to reach their full potential as lifelong learners, but it doesn't say anything in all of this about an absolute standard. Because when you get out of, you know, 12th grade or higher education or your professional degree or whatever, you got to be able to cut it. When you get out of industry, you have to know the math. You have to know, if you're in social services, you have to know the psychology and so on and so forth, right? I'd like to see something about absolute standards so that we know that the product, if you call the kids a product, you know, that we're generating actually will fly in the real world. And so when we talk about growth, and we don't have any cutoffs, you know, I mean, yeah, they exceeded or not exceeded.
Well, but what, and truthfully, what you're seeing is both the growth and the attainment. Because the attainment, it's the part scores, whether we believe that it's a good assessment or not, that's the attainment on how we're being measured right now. Our performance on SAT, that attainment score, that the state has said that's the benchmark. Now, obviously, the College Board has a different benchmark, but the state has a benchmark. And that's how we're being measured. And they're saying this is the line that all kids are supposed to be getting over. Now, we can get into criterion reference assessments and norm reference assessments, which I know you understand fully. But obviously, when we have norm reference assessments, then there's always going to be the median and the standard deviations that go in both directions. So there's that nuance in there as well. I think a standalone meeting to come back and review this would be wonderful.
I think we're all committed to that, are we not? Yeah, I'm not sure that I can absorb much more. I'm so sorry.
Let's leave you on kind of a little note here. So
A wrap up.
a wrap, yes.
Mike was working here.
One thing that ESSA looks at, but we also look at is our freshmen on track. Are they on track to graduate? And what we do see here, I believe they changed how they measured it between 14 and 15, but we see here the trends that we like to see. So I'll kind of end on that note where we have seen increasing percentages of students in 9th grade who are on track to graduate. And then we also see kind of in terms of our graduation rate on the next slide. The orange bar is actually DHS. The light orange bar is our district as a whole, which includes some students who are receiving their education at other serving schools for a variety of reasons. But we're still right here, we're still above the state average. The state average is 85.4, I believe. In terms of DHS, the bright orange bar, our percent of students who are graduating, which is part of helping kids fulfill their potential. So if you can go over the next two slides here, we'll go over those in more detail when we have a kind of an ESSA deep data dive as well, and kind of get more into some of those questions. Are there any kind of basic questions? Oh, so the next steps really are part of that piece. So as we highlighted here, there as just a few examples of ways in which different curriculum teams are starting to answer or address the questions that you're asking. How do we move the needle? How do we turn the ship? to a different direction. And so that's happening in different places throughout the district. We are also looking at a deeper dive in the data, our district data at different meetings as well. And we'll be able to share some of that with you as well. And then buildings are just starting to work on some of their ESSA plans. I don't know, anyone else have any last comments about that?
I think that's something that hasn't been mentioned, that globally also respond to these needs are our SEL plan and our diversity plan. Both of those plans were put in place because of those pieces that we're mentioning, those motivational pieces, engagement pieces that really respond to our students in reaching them and teaching them in order to meet these standards.
I think that'll be a piece of what we do when we get together and talk about these issues. I'd like to have somebody make a case on how that, it's never been made to me, it's clear enough anyway, how the diversity plan and
The social emotional plan?
right, how those are
Tied
planned
into
to move the bar.
Okay.
Well, how
Okay.
they will be measured with fidelity, and how we're going to know that they're actually working, and what is exactly the goal of it at the end of it.
I think that's a very good point.
I will be in touch with you, Amy. That's great. And we will work on a date.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Hold that thought though.
How?
Next, we have the non-business consent agenda. This is an action item that the Board of Education approve the non-business consent agenda items A through J. Do we have a motion?
Move, so moved.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Jeff Albert,
Yes.
Carrie Millette,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez.
Yes.
Howard Solomon,
No.
Fred Davis.
Yes.
Next, we have the business consent agenda. This is an action item that the Board of Education approve the business consent agenda item A, purchase other requisition list. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Carrie Millette,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez,
Yes.
Howard Solomon,
Yes.
Fred Davis.
Yes.
Jeff Albert.
Yes.
Next is business and finance, request to bid summer projects 2019. This is discussion information. Danny.
We're already getting to that time of year, so planning for summer of 2019. As you may recall, we are moving forward with the master facility plan in conjunction with assistance from our architect, as well as the 10-year life safety survey for the high school and Portland Elementary. But we can't wait for those reports to be done, but to hold off on determining what we would like to consider for summer of 2019. So what I brought forth to you are the projects that we're considering. I've broken them up into project priorities 1 and 2. There are some large numbers on there, but I think I do want to remind the board of some past history regarding projects and delays in projects. Back in 2015, the decision was made to reduce the capital projects and the budget line in operations and maintenance by $300,000 a year. And that's been for 4 years, and that was to help supplement the deficit in regards to the Chromebook rollout timing. So we've had 1.2 million that have projects that would have been completed, or most likely would have been completed over those 4 years that have been delayed. In addition, the facilities department at one point was also asked for another way to help reduce the deficit, and we proposed the modified cleaning plan, which saved $200,000 each year. We're consistently saving that $200 a year. So as we're looking to next summer, I'd like the board to consider the priority 1 projects. And at this point, we need to consider going out to bid on those and moving forward on the ones that are listed there. They include the asphalt seal coating at the high school and the middle schools. We used to do these every other year. We do half the district 1 year and half the next. We have not done that rotation. We've done some random seal coating projects, but the high school has not been fully seal coated since 2015. And then Rosette and Huntley have not been done since 2014. So again, moving forward, and then what I would be proposing after we get the master facility plan is that we do get into a 3-year rotation cycle on our seal coating so that we are maintaining these, because in the long run, it's just gonna cost us more money if we continue to delay this type of maintenance.
When you say 3-year rotation, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, so that in 3 years you're starting back over again, after the 3rd year you're starting over again.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Another large portion of this is flooring replacements. We have done some flooring replacements of carpeting and other flooring throughout the district, but not in large quantities. We have some buildings with some very old carpets and flooring that need to be replaced in our classrooms, some in our offices, and so I have 2 buildings, Lincoln and Jefferson, that I'm proposing. Lincoln would be the entire school that would be redone, and at this point, I'm just recommending a small portion of Jefferson, which those offices are currently somewhat causing more of a tripping hazard because the carpet is so loose. And then I would be coming forward in future years for the rest of the Jefferson building, as well as Founders and some other classrooms. The HVAC upgrades. I've actually came forward on 2 occasions for the Huntley air conditioning, to add air conditioning to the classrooms that are not air conditioned at Huntley Middle School. That was back in 2015 and 2017. And at that time, it was decided that the funding was not available to add air to those spaces, but these are classrooms at Huntley that are general ed size classrooms. And so I'm recommending we move forward with that. And the last 2 things are the high school tennis court resurface. We have some cracking going on there. It is time to resurface that tennis court. That is one of the projects. And the last is the Founders Gymnasium. We call it the rubber gym floor. And that floor was proposed to be replaced back in 2016 with TIF funding from the city, if you recall. And we had to delay that project because of the safety issues from the tower that was crumbling. And so we had to put the money that was slated for the gym floor to the tower. So in all of this shuffling, we've delayed a lot of projects that I feel we really can no longer continue to delay. We have to get started. We have to put some monies towards this. We're starting to see a more positive trend in this, and we need to allocate that funding. The funding that we do have available, there's 2 sheets that were attached to the board rec. One was the projects, the other is the funding analysis. For the O&M projects, we have some money in the capital projects for this fiscal year as well as next fiscal year. There's also $1 million in Fund 60, which is a combination of funds still from the referendum in 2009-11, that the original referendum, and then recapture funding, capture agreement funding from the Wildflower Drive property that we were able to recover last fiscal year, to total $1 million. And then the last is the life safety projects. We do come forward usually and have some life safety projects proposed every year. We've been delaying roofing. We are currently about 2 years behind in what we had planned to do roofing for Little John and Lincoln. Those are the 2 projects I'm recommending we move forward with life safety money for next summer, and then continue looking at life safety in the future to continue to get our roofs current so that we're not continuing past life expectancy on them.
Are you, go ahead.
So did we put in, when they did TIF 3, is restricted as far as location? When they were putting TIF 3 in, and TIF 3, I don't think is finalized at this point, did we have any kind of intention to put that gym floor, which was out of the past TIF, that was TIF 2, right? That particular gym floor was on TIF 2, but did we then shift TIF 2 money over to the tower?
Well, what happened is we received $2 million from TIF 2 to do some improvements, and the original plan was to do the Founders floor, but then the tower situation handled.
And the TIF money then shift over to that tower project?
Yes.
Okay, and so for TIF 3, did we put in that floor, I mean, did we put that back into a TIF?
That was a one-time monies that we received from the city, the $2 million. So that was $2 million, and then we were done.
On the TIF 2?
Yeah, but TIF 3, there is not a school within the boundaries of TIF 3.
Got that. I mean, I didn't understand that particular part.
Yeah, it has to be within those boundaries.
It has to do with it. It doesn't include.
Right.
We have no schools in TIF 3. We really don't have any, on TIF 3, we really don't have any projects that are cut in that, the borderline of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for clearing that up.
But can't TIF monies be moved adjacent from one TIF to an adjacent TIF?
Yes, if the city wants access to do that. They can port basically surplus dollars from one TIF to another, so long as they're adjacent to each other, yes.
Yeah.
Now, TIF 2 is going to end. It's actually going to end at the end of this year, so really, then just TIF 1 will be left. And then pieces of TIF 1 will go into TIF 3 as well, so.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah.
So do we have a consensus to bring back the request to bid summer projects for 2019? Yeah, I'm sorry. thought you
Can
were-
I ask, yeah, I mean, that kind of reminded me of another question. But so Cindy, what's our fund balance with respect to our 15 to 25% ratio? Where do we stand now?
We're at about 35 million at the end of fiscal 18, which is about 45, or actually 43%.
Okay, so
We're about
we're well above our 25, 15 to 25, right? That's
Yeah,
why we-
15 to 25 is board policy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, I mean, this is all good as far as I'm concerned. You know, what's being presented about these projects and request to bid. What I'm thinking is, let's do more.
Can we wait and entertain that after our next board meeting, which Cindy and I will have a presentation on another topic, which addresses that surplus that we have.
I think there are probably a lot of different directions. Money can always go in a million ways, right?
I appreciate you saying, let's do more.
Well, I mean,
But it could be possibly in conjunction.
I don't know,
with
it's like
another
the fourth time I've asked about this ratio of 15 to 25% board policy, whether or not we should change that. This is why I think FFAC has a lot of work on its plate.
Well, maybe next year you can be the chair.
Yeah, not.
Yeah, we like you here. We like you around. I do anyway. I want to ask you this.
Hold on, one, because to Carrie's question, FFAC did go through this whole list, and they wanted to.
Of these
recommend-
projects. No, that's not what I mean.
I'm sorry. but
No,
they
I
want-
mean FFAC with respect to the policy, the 15 to 25% policy.
To look over.
Things have changed. I mean, the funding, the GSA mechanism for funding, that's changed, right? Whether or not we're gonna have to pay pensions, that's a potential change. There's a whole bunch of things. And I believe that FFAC needs to weigh in on this stuff before it gets to us like tonight, right? So this is fine. I mean, you know, what you brought Tammy and Cindy, you know, with the money and so on in this, I think it's all fine. But I think that there's an implication, if you look at the big picture view, there's an implication that perhaps this list could be bigger.
Well, Carrie will say, with the master facility plan that'll be coming out at the first of the year, that'll give us an opportunity to see
To look at
more
it
globally
globally.
across all of our buildings. You know, these are what are high priority, but then we can put together more of a funding plan, a project plan for the next 5 years, which could include a budget expansion so that we can handle those larger scale in upcoming summers.
And sorry,
Not looking at my.
I just wanted to, so Carrie, what I'm saying is the FFAC did go through this whole list at our last meeting. I wanted to bring it all forward for the priority ones, it's their recommendation to move forward.
I'm fine with it. You know, I think, you know, the list is good, the presentation is good, the money's there. We just have to decide whether to spend it. You know, but I'm also thinking that beyond that, you know, that as long as we're at 43, 45%, and our policy is 15 to 25, that's telling me we need to be looking at that. Where is that money going to go? And there's a lot of places it could go, but that's why we need to look at it. And we need, I think, we just talked about TIF again, right? Hoarding money from one or the other, whether or not the TIF stops or when it stops will be extended, all of this stuff. This is all, in my view, purview of FFAC. These are people from the community that have a field of view that's bigger than ours. And that's what I want, is their instruction, their advice, so that when we look at it from 428's point of view, it makes sense with the bigger picture.
And for the record, you spent a great deal of time on FFAC.
It was a while.
And having the updated master facilities plan, like Tammy mentioned, is
That'll
really
help.
going to start that process.
Yeah.
So really delve into that for the next year.
I'm not looking at my computer because I didn't get time to get home and get it. What's the entire amount that you are talking about here?
For the projects I'm looking to bid out, in O&M money, it would be just over 1.5 million, and that concludes contingency, architect, and engineering costs. And for life safety, it would be right about $914,000.
So the total being 24,
2.5 million.
Yeah.
You know,
It's coming out, some of it's coming out of the life safety
Yes.
money and so there's.
So-
different.
this brings to mind something else that kind of folds in with the conversation, and that is, you mentioned life safety. The tower was a life safety issue. I mean, it was falling down. It could have hurt somebody.
It was
Not in the sense that we normally think of life safety, right?
not, and
But-
it is be qualified.
I mean, you know, on the other end of the extreme,
It
I mean,
did
a
qualify.
torn rug is a life safety issue too, and it's not nearly the cost of the tower, generally speaking.
We're talking about locating it in a particular spot. If it doesn't be, like, it can't be located in that spot, you can't call it that. So,
It doesn't,
But-
those
but-
projects don't qualify.
I'm
for
just-
safety, so we
I'm
have
just
to
using that as an
tax-
example to where I want to go, and that is when we consider the 15 to 25% as our policy, as a board policy for where the fund balance ought to be, and when we consider where the increment beyond 25% up to 43, 45, whatever it turns out to be at the time, you know, maybe we ought to have a fund, I don't know if we have one or not, actually, Cindy, you know, for these kinds of faults, you know, like the tower, like the dugouts, like whatever comes up in the way of brick and mortar. I don't mean typical replacement like seal coat and rugs and gym floors. Those are all just, and turf at the high school. Those are all known maintenance issues.
Gary, let's put that on the agenda.
Yeah, so there's,
I mean,
there you go
that's not-
again.
It really has
Yeah.
nothing to do with Tammy. She's just looking for
Yeah,
some
but
help.
I'm just saying that-
Surprise.
Yeah.
Let's move
Okay.
this forward.
Policy has got her.
So do
It's not her
we have
deal.
a consensus to bring this back, to request bids for summer projects 2019? Do we have a consensus to bring it back at the next meeting for approval?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Was I in the
Thanks,
lead?
Tammy.
What?
Was I in the lead?
Very much so.
You're on the ground.
You are, but I'm not anywhere near you to pinch you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so next we have request for proposal, RFP for pupil transportation services, and this is an informational item.
So we're in year 5 of our contract with First Student. A couple years back, we came to extend their contract when, it was originally a 3-year contract with 2 one-year extensions, and we were able to get a fairly decent deal with First Student, so the board decided to extend for another 2 years. Now we're in a situation where we need to go out and bid for that. We've been with First Student for a long time. I tried to find out exactly how long, pretty much 20+ years is what it sounds like, but every 5 years we do rebid this. State code says you do need to do that. If you have other vendors that are interested in you, we haven't had any that really have approached us, but we still feel it's a good practice to go out and rebid our transportation service. So this is an informational item, and then this will be brought back at the next meeting for action if the board would like to go out for RFP for transportation.
Good question. How do we address an expansion of, or a change in service from them? In other words, if they have to add a route and change to it, how do we address that? Is that addressed within the contract? Is that addressed by changing the nuances of the contract within the structure?
Yeah, because the way the contract works, it's always on a per route basis. Most of the pricing is that way. So when we're going to do the RFP, we look at what our routes are right now, and then everybody prices it based on what we're currently doing within our district. So then if we have to expand routes, or because we, have more kids going from here to there, then it really is based on that per route basis. And then at the,
But does the contract accommodate that? I mean,
Yes.
Can they then say, we're needing to add a route, we're going to add this to the contract?
yes, because it's part of the contract, he has room for expansion, I guess.
I see.
Yes.
Okay.
Are we ready for defining those routes for the ramp program that we just recently agreed to?
Will there be transportation for ramp?
For the project search,
Yeah.
it would be, have we,
They won't
it
be.
won't,
Yeah,
it would be
added routes.
just,
We,
no,
we're transporting those students now.
to DHS.
We'll
Yeah,
just
so
be
it's just
transporting to a different location.
After the meeting, Jason from First Student and I talked about this, and he was concerned, he wanted to know, if he could know, what he would have to be looking at.
So it's really probably just changing what that route looks like you said.
It would be changing point B, because point, instead of coming to the high school, they'd be going to a different location.
So,
We're going to bring this before us.
so this, we want a consensus on request for proposal for RFP for pupil transportation services. Consensus?
Yes.
Right, next we have approval of estimated tax levy 2018 tax year. This is an action item that the Board of Education approve the estimated tax levy for the 2018 tax year for publication.
So this is the first step in the process.
I just need to get a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
So what are we voting on right now?
Or her going to?
We're gonna have a presentation.
That's all we're-
Discussion.
Mhm.
And then
Then we'll vote.
whether to make it this public. There's many steps.
That I understand, but I'm just making sure.
Many-
I'm like, we skipped
Many
this step.
steps before you're voting on an official.
So this is the first step in the 2018 tax levy process, is to come up with an estimate of what that looks like, and then get posted in the paper, and then we go through other steps as well, like Jamie mentioned. So first, in terms of just some general information, the tax levy is the amount of dollars that each school district asks for in the next school year for expenditures. These taxes got collected in 2019, and we use them as revenue in 1920. So we're always using revenue to the next fiscal year, even though we received some of the dollars in the June of this year, of 2019. This is the largest source of revenue for the district, and it's also the most reliable and stable revenue source. So the next slide, here's a quick pie chart in terms of how much revenue we do receive in local property taxes. It's about 51% of our total revenue, of about just shy of 90 million. That was based on 17-18 numbers. Next slide. So the tax levy calendar, the way that this process works is you have to approve estimated levies prior to a public hearing being held. So that has to be done at least 20 days before the final levy adoption. You have to post those numbers in the newspaper, and then we would hold a public hearing on December 4th, so that's within that time frame. And also at that same meeting, the board would adopt the levy, and at that time, the board can adjust that tax levy request. So what we're looking at today may not necessarily be what we approve on December 4th. And then we have to file the levy by December 26th. And it is important, if you don't file a levy, you don't receive tax. So it's basically a pretty prescribed process that we need to go through. The next slide is just a quick history, well, not quite quick, it's since 2007, of where we've been in terms of our equalized assessed value, which is part of the levy calculation, and also our tax rate history. So the line at the top is really what our tax rate is and where we were back in 2007. You can see EAVs were going up, so that rate was basically going along with that. But then now we're basically in a cycle. We were up, now when we were down during the recession, now EAVs are going back up, and that tax rate is starting to decrease and go down because we do have more EAVs to tap into. So the next slide, the components of the tax caps. I won't read every single piece of this, but the big things I want to hone in on is that we no longer have a limit on our education fund. That was new with the evidence-based funding. We used to have like a $4 limit, and now that there is no limit, so we can basically levy in the funds that we need to levy into, rather than putting it all into transportation and having those transfers that we had to do the last 2 years. You can see that our EAV did decrease over $231 million from 2009 to 2014, due mostly to the recession. Now we are in an upswing, so since 2015, we saw our first decrease in a lot of years, and based on the estimates that we received from the assessor, over that 2015 to 2018 period, we're looking at about a little over $100 million increase in our DAV, which is about 18% increase since that period of time. There's also components of the tax cap, as we are limited to what we can receive. And we're limited by the increase of 5% or CPI, whichever is less. And the CPI that's being used for this tax levy year is 2.1%, because it's always the CPI from the previous calendar year. So the next slide here, I'm just going to really focus on where you can see the highlighted area, which is based on the estimates that we received from the assessor, what our EAV estimates are, and our new construction numbers. So as of October 29th, what we received from the assessor is our EAV, rate setting EAV is about $732 million. So you can see that's about a $32 million increase from the prior year of 2017. Also new construction of about $2.5 million.
Hold on a second.
I'm trying to get it open for you, Jim.
I'm so sorry. Get that pointer, will you please? I want to get that. You're pointing to something. I need to know that.
Ben's got it.
Here, I already studied this.
I got it. I studied it. I can't remember it. Sorry.
So right
So there you go.
here,
Thank you.
yes. So the highlighted area, so here is really what the estimate received is from the assessor, the $732 million equalized assessed value for it.
Right.
And here is the 2.5 million is what they're projecting that is new construction within our taxing area. So not quite as well as we did last year, obviously. Here's 2.1%, that's the CPI that's being used for this tax levy year. And here is the limiting rate. This is what the tax rate would be if all this came into fruition for the tax rate, which is the limiting rate, which is on our operating funds. So you can see that historically our tax rate, the limiting rate where it's gone, and right now you can see it's starting to decrease because we have the increase in equalized assessed value. The increase in EAV from the prior year is about 4.47%. Then I'm going to focus kind of more at the bottom here. So here you can see this, the 50.2 million is what we would be, what would happen if these numbers did come into fruition. This is how much we receive in operating funds. Well, not necessarily receive, that's how much we would be expended. I'll kind of get into that a little bit later. And then down here, that next is the bond and interest. That's how much we have to get from our levy to pay our debt that we have on our bonds. And then the total is about 55 million, and our tax rate would be 7.627 under this scenario.
And that's the tax rate due to the district, not the overall tax rate.
No, that's just due to the district.
Right.
Yes.
7.6 and last year's was 7.7.
7.72. And again, this is an estimate because right now we're really flying blind to some extent because we don't know what the actuals are. We won't know the actuals until March or April.
But it's the same way every year.
Oh, yeah.
We're always making an estimate based on what the assessor's given us.
Right.
So what we're estimating is a decrease in tax rate.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, based on the estimates. So the next slide is, I actually pulled bills, and I believe I had this on our presentation last year as well, using the same 3 properties and just randomly pulled some bills and did a history of where those taxpayers were. And so you can see based on the 2018 estimates that I just showed you and what was paid last year for somebody who's here in the estimated market value, let's see, 118,000. Their tax bill would increase by $81 based on the current estimates that we're looking at. And then the next one was $117 and $133. And you have to remember, every property gets assessed a little differently. Not everybody gets the same assessment, even though the EAV increased by 4.47%. That doesn't necessarily mean your property or your neighbor's property is going to increase by that. There's a lot of variables within each of the assessments. Also looked at the comparison between 2018 estimate and what the actual tax bills were for these specific properties. So for this top property here, they had the 7-year change was $407 more, so an average of about $58 a year. This other property was a change of actually a decrease of $44, so about $6 a year decrease, and then this bottom was $126 for about $18 a year increase. So I think it's important to look at historically what's happened over a couple of years.
Cindy, do you live in Dekalb?
No, I don't. So levy considerations. Again, we talked about this. This is the best guess of what we feel we can capture local property revenue based on the estimates. All the factors of the equation are known except for that EAV and new property, which are pretty big factors that we need to know to get those final numbers. And this is an important aspect. The county will only extend what we ask for. So we can ask for 100 million more, but we're only going to get what we're capped to get, what we can legally receive. And in order to capture, because we don't know exactly what the EAB is or the new property, in order to capture all those dollars, we typically will increase the levy request to take into consideration those things that we don't know at this point. And one of the big things we do not know, and we talked about this earlier, is the TIF 3. If that TIF were to be created, there's additional increment that would be placed in our new construction bucket that we could have access to. Because some of those properties, what happens is they're already in TIF 1, that increment resets and we get access to that increment at that time. And if the city decides to form that TIF, then we would have that much more new construction to access. And again,
Can I clarify something though? Or ask a question and you can clarify for me?
Yeah.
If that scenario happens and TIF 3 is developed and the 5.25 million becomes available, can you go back and recapture that if captured in this levy?
no. Yeah. You only have that opportunity at the time that it gets into the new construction.
When it becomes new construction?
Yes.
Right, makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can't go back and say, oh, well, I want that back. No, you cannot. Because once you don't, that's why it's very important when these TIFs start coming off, that we know when they're coming off, when they're expiring, and we know when they're going to come into new construction.
Wait a second. So is it right that the new construction is the one thing we can levy against in the TIF district? Otherwise, we have to wait for 23 years.
No, oh, no. Actually, what that is, it's called new construction because it's the increment. Because we didn't have access to that increase in those values in those properties over the 23 years, then when it expires, it becomes available to us. So during the life of the TIF, if there's new construction going on within that TIF or an increase in the EAV, we don't have access to that over that. And we only get access to it when it expires.
Yeah.
The increment, right. Because what happens is the EAV gets set at whatever it is at that point in time.
The base.
The base, exactly. And anything above that is what city has access to.
Because it'll go back into the TIF district. So
Right.
it's open for that window before, and then the base is reset.
Yes, right.
Okay.
And then the bottom here, we typically don't receive 100% of what was actually extended, and I'll go through that in the next slide. So here's a history of what we request in our levy, what we actually get extended, which is really what the county does for us, and what we actually receive. So I'm highlighting the 17 year and the 16 year because these are actual numbers. So you can see, let's look at 17. We requested 56.1 million, and that would have been what we went through last year at this time. What we actually got extended was 54.1 million. So that's what the county clerk says, okay, here's what you requested. Now we know all our actuals, and this is what the actual extension is. So which is actually here, the difference between what is requested and extended is $2 million less. So basically that concept that what you've asked for, you're not going to be extended that amount. Now, the other very important piece of this too is what we're actually receiving. So there's 3 different numbers within the components of what we receive on our tax levy, what we actually receive, because what we received is about 3.3 million less than what we requested. And the reason why there would be a difference between what we actually extended and received is we have some tax abatements, 3M that get taken off the bottom, as well as there's PTAP that come through, which is the property tax assessment appeals. So there's monies, even though they say, okay, we're extending you 54.1 million, we only received 52.8 million. So we received that much less. So about 97% of what's actually extended on the tax levy. I know it's confusing, there's a lot of numbers, but it's basically.
But really the 2 focus on are the top one. What we request in the levy was 56. What actually ended up going in our funds was the 52.
Right.
Because again, between the 54 and the 52, there's monies that have to be paid out to, again.
The big part of that is the
various
abatements. Yeah.
But again, there's a very different number by the time we request it and what's actually extended to us to go in our budget.
So basically, we're down to what we would like to request. So that's what's here at the top, the tax levy request, and it's broken down between the operating levy and the bonded interest levy. So in order to make sure we're capturing any changes in EAV or the new construction, we're requesting more than what we're looking at here at the bottom, that was based on the EAC assessments from the assessor, the EAV from the assessor. So we're asking for about 5% more than what this is saying right here. Now we'll get something in between. There's probably something more like this down here. But because we just don't have all the knowns, what they call it is ballooning the levy, which, so we can capture any of those unknowns. Next slide.
I'm ready for questions.
This is the last one, I believe. Yes. So here's some opportunities or for some property tax relief. Is really on the bond and interest levy. Again, that would require a resolution by the board. And I calculated for about every $1 million that is abated in bond and interest. And basically what you're doing is you're telling the county clerk, we needed $5.4 million to pay our bond and interest. We're only going to ask for $4.4 million. So basically decreasing that levy. So the estimated reduction in the tax bill for a homeowner that has a home that's worth about $150,000 is $60. The benefit of this is it doesn't affect your revenue stream, because if you under levy on the operating side, so let's say we don't ask for $1 million on the operating side, that $1 million gets compounded from year to year because your extension is that much less in the next year to use in the calculation. So that first year, you're not getting that $1 million, then also the next year, you're not getting the $1 million from the previous year, plus the current year, so it's going to be $2 million, plus whatever the increase in the CPI may have been for that year. And that compounds basically forever as this, based on how the tax levy works.
I'm just throwing a tag in the works. I like to do that. So I'm seeing $60 here, and I'm seeing 82. Is that the number that you're talking about us raising the tax of 82 for the average home?
Well, that was an actual tax bill.
Whatever.
That was somebody that had like a different EAD
Okay.
in this one. Yeah.
But, so in other words, here's my question, that aside, what would it take for us to not raise taxes a dime this year? I mean, this looks like this is taking us down 60, which is close to not raising it a dime. I don't want to raise it a dime. How would we do that?
Can you go back to the previous?
What's that?
And see, I think we should freeze it. We cannot continue. I mean,
Well, freezing, I would talk about 1 year freezing.
1 year
You're talking-
freezing, yeah, 1 year freezing, not permanently, but it's freezing it because, I mean, we
That's what I got on board for.
Exactly. I mean, you and I, Victoria, the last forums that we had while we were campaigning, that was the #1 conversation. People in Dekalb can no longer continue to pay these.
Well, it's a point of, I mean, it's just saying, hey, no, taxes don't go up.
They don't. People need relief.
I'm just saying, what would it take to do that?
Well, if I'm looking at here, this is the estimates down here. So, based on the EAVs here, would be an increase of 1.7 million in the total levy. That includes the bond and interest and the operating levy. If you wanted to basically keep it level, you would want to abate the bonds by about 1.7 million, by that number.
Okay, so abating is one thing, but a freeze in tax levy is one thing.
It's basically doing the same thing. If you want to keep
from the email, I didn't gather that from you, Cynthia. So I want some transparency in terms of what you mean by abatement, because I'm not seeing the transparency. And I'm talking about, in general, the tax levy freezing this year, and then looking at the abatement and actually looking at paying down our bonds and reducing our taxes, because they're ridiculous. Let's look at downtown. Let's look at that's why I asked, do you live here? Because in reality, people, it's.
I pay taxes too in the state.
Oh, I'm sure.
I absolutely do, and I completely appreciate that. So I take that a little personally to some extent.
Oh, I understand, but
Yes.
we do too, especially
I absolutely understand that.
when I get messages on Christmas Day saying, thank you for raising my taxes. I take that very personal. So I'm not coming at you. I'm saying what everyone in Dekalb has desperately want. I mean,
Cindy does what we ask her to do, so
Exactly.
it's not her deal. This is not her deal. This is a question that we're bringing up right now. You're bringing it up, I'm bringing it up.
So let's answer.
And we're asking you the question, what would it take?
The question is on the table, to freeze, we would be, the 1.7 million. 1.734575.
Yes.
That's what, in essence, we would say, we're not going to levy for that amount. And we would go into our reserves to make up the 1.2 for our operating and the 526 to pay our bond and interest. So,
And our reserves are the thing that Gary was talking about, which we keep at 25, which you currently have at 45, 43, or whatever it is. Is that the reserve?
yes, or the other option is, you run the levy through, and then after the levy, you turn around and you abate to $1 million, 1.7, you abate bond and interest. So in other words, we pay down on our bond and interest, which, let's face it, bond and interest is part of what is handcuffing the district. Now, we have a beautiful high school, we have beautiful Cortland and other construction that accompany that. But, bond and interest is part of what is, the ball and chain right now to our tax.
The same message. I don't think it's saying it sends the same. Paying down the bond and interest is one thing. That's a good thing.
And I appreciate
I'm just saying it doesn't send the same message. If we say to the taxpayers, we are not raising your taxes this year, we are freezing your taxes this year, that sends a completely different message than paying down and saying, hey, you're still going to benefit if we get rid of the bond and interest. They don't understand that. They get it maybe, but I don't think they understand. I don't think it sends the same message.
Well,
Forgive me, I'm just being devil's advocate
No,
here.
that's exactly where I stand.
But reducing the bond and interest levy will freeze the tax.
I get that, but they doesn't get it. It is like saying, hey, we're gonna, your payment on your automobile, if we change that around and we pay the payment, and if we do this and we move this, you're gonna be paying less this year. They go, oh, I don't get that part. But if you say, I'm not raising your taxes this year, that's a different thing. It sends a different message, I believe. And again, that's why I got on this thing. And so it's a big deal for me. And I think that we have an opportunity, since we do have the 43 instead of the 25. I think we've got money to deal with this and to send a message.
And if the
Along
I'm
the
sorry.
way, Cindy is, I think, saying that we dig ourselves a hole if we ask for less than the maximum.
On the operating, but we can still decrease the bond and interest and keep the tax rate low.
We are penalizing.
I'm looking at it
That's my
saying
question.
next
Are we
year.
talking about rate? Is that what we're trying to get to? Dropping the rate?
I think so.
We've been increasing I know that we haven't been increasing it by much, and I know that the point has been made over time that we've been doing it in small increments, and you've made the point very well that we've been holding the line to a certain extent, but the horses left the barn. I mean, people are just getting killed on the rate, and I think that we have to say, we understand that, and I think it makes a huge difference when people making the choice of coming to Dekalb to say, I think that this message that says, hey, we are going to take a hit, and it's going to hurt, but we've got to take a hit in order to get this thing down.
And a resource trust in the community, which is the biggest thing. We're the biggest taxing body, and they just want relief. That's all taxpayers want.
I want to get outside the
Your point's
district
well made, Howard, thank you.
with regard to the rate. You say $60 you're going to save or whatever it is in actual dollars for the standard $150,000 home or whatever it is. People that are shopping for homes look at rates, and they look at rates from town to town and from year to year. They don't look at any of the rest of the stuff. That's what they look at. They don't know that you're going to abate or that you're going to do good things down the road. What they do is they say, I want to move, like I did, from Wheaton to, I end up in Malta. It could have been Dekalb, or it could have been Portland, who knows. But anyway, they look at what's out there and they make comparisons. And the rate is the thing they look at. They don't get into the detail like this. So I think that if you're going to send a message, you send the best message to everybody by changing the rate and not talking about abatement and all these other potentials later. And that's what we really need to do. We need to broaden the base. We need to bring more people here so that every person can pay less. That's what the TIF is supposed to do. And I'm going to go on the second stage of my comment here. When we ask for more money based on EAB, when it's a project in a TIF that's residential, we know we're going to need that revenue. because we know we're gonna have more seats, more kids, more teachers, more everything, right? We know we'll need the revenue. And there's a TIF for commercial, institutional, blah, 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 other things other than residential to provide students.
Gyms.
Yeah. Health centers on Bethany Road, nonprofit, goodbye tax base. Anyway, when we do an expansion of the local economy with residential involved, we know it's going to cost the district a lot of money. We need to capture that. But when we do something like TIF 3 downtown, if that should happen, that's commercial, that's retail. It's not going to increase our cost here in the district by much. We don't need to capture that money because it's not the same thing as 1,000 new homes going in.
We want to see growth then. We want to see growth.
Yeah, you want to
And
encourage, you want a motivation
exactly.
thing, you want an incentive so that people will come here and
Exactly.
say, hey, they're not raising my taxes, I'm going to go there. And the people that want to buy a house, when they look at the rate, they'll say, their rate's been going down for the last 2-3 years, I'm going to go there. And not to mention the new high school and good things that we have. But I'm starting to look at this more in detail than I used to. I used to understand, yeah, you got to capture this, as you said, Cindy, it compounds over the years and so on. But I'm beginning to think I got to look at it in greater detail yet. Because we're going to market ourselves and we're going to truly expand the base, then we have to make them believe what we're saying.
I only have, and this was, my only question is this. I mean, if we look at the tax rates the last 3 years, it was 824, 781, 772. So the tax rate has been, trending down.
And that's because the EAV has been trending up.
Exactly, because the EAV goes up and had all the EAV not been captured, at one point, I think it peaked out at 115 million that was in the TIF districts. That would have been accessible to the taxing bodies. So these rates, back when they were even higher, wouldn't have been that high. Had all that 115 million that was held in TIF district been accessible by the districts. That's a different conversation.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to, if the board were to choose to freeze the rate and go deficit spend by $0.7 million, how long do we do that?
That's the question back to the ratio, the 50 to 25%. We've got to know how much reserve we need, and we still have information coming in on that.
Because at some point, this board has to go back, we'll have to make the decision not to deficit spend by, 1.72 million a year. And you don't want to play, yo-yo with your tax rate. That's the only thing that I think that needs to be taken into consideration.
And that's the transparency.
But how far, I mean, again, we were talking about fund balance, we've talked about the bond and interest debt. And if we're going to get into the not the game, but the habit of borrowing into fund balance, I mean, at some point, you've got to get yourself out of that.
There's some unknowns that, like Carrie just said, we obviously can't go into right now, but there are some things that we can potentially look at down the line, and we should be given more than one option, and to continue to balloon and to increase each time. And I understand that we don't recapture everything, even if it's not much, but it sends a message to the taxpayers that we don't care, that we're just going to continue to do this. And Carrie, you said it last year, and this is exactly what the issue is, and we cannot continue to do this. It just can't happen anymore. Dekalb needs, especially from the school board, to hear that we do hear them, that we are on the same page with them.
I want to address, I want to interject this in response to what you're saying there. I think you guys are here to make sure that we are solvent and that we're moving forward and we're able to do the things that we need to do. I think, I'm very passionate about this, I think that the taxpayers of Dekalb need a message that says, we're freezing your taxes this year.
Yeah.
We could take them up. We can increase them, and we're not. We understand we are in league with you. We are representing you. we are here to represent you, and we are making some effort to try to do the right thing by you. And it may or may not be something we can do next year, but we're gonna do this year for you guys. And I think that the taxpayers need that message. They're tired of hearing this. I mean, throughout this election cycle, we've been hearing what a miserable place this Illinois is. I mean, everybody's been throwing that around, and they've been getting these horrible messages through this election cycle. I think we need to give them some good news. We need to say, we're gonna do this. And it's not in our best interest necessarily, but that's not the point.
Well, if you bring more people in and increase the economy overall, it would be in our best interest.
I mean, that part of it, I think that's part of what.
And that's the only way out of the game. I mean, you'll never win if you can't increase the base.
And we're not
It's
doing a
just
big
pushing
job
the
of doing
can
that.
further down the road.
I mean, this year we've got a few new houses out west of town. That's it. We've been doing it for 4 years. We've had nothing. We've had nothing.
Yep.
And I think we have to recognize that. We have to be aware of that as the biggest taxing body in this town. We have to be aware of that. So anyway, that's my speech. I'll shut up now.
If that's the direction that the board is asking us to go, then what Cindy and I need to do is bring back some recalculated numbers and show what that's gonna look like, so the board knows what we're voting on.
So can we have multiple options? Because obviously, I don't know, I haven't heard a lot from Howard or Victoria or Fred about that. So options so that, you know.
I'd like to see the options and kind of really see the numbers, what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I'd like to show the connections, because I think you do see the implications of one way of doing it, which is basically freezing the operating levy. And then also the other way of using the bond and interest to do basically the same thing, but still have flexibility. So yeah, again, we want to show all those options.
Because again, if it's the rate that we're trying to get to, and I guess that's why I was asking, if it's the rate we're trying to get to, there's more than one way to get to the rate. But,
all has been.
one question, Cindy. If, now obviously we're here on November 6th. We come back November 20th, December 4th, we still have time to.
Well, what we would have to do is push everything back a board meeting. So basically do it on November 20th, like we did. I actually am doing this earlier this year, because last year we were kind of behind the government stuff. So we can still do a November 20th, approve an aggregate levy, a number that goes in the paper, and then the hearing would be at the second meeting in December. So December 18th, I think that is, 19th. So kind of back to the schedule that we're typical.
It would be our December 18th, we would
Yes.
have to.
Yes.
We would have to vote
Yeah,
for a final levy.
Yeah,
so
you'd have
we
to
can file
vote,
it.
fine, right, exactly. But that gives us that time between now and the next board meeting to work on some different scenarios and then a better comfort level with the board of what that. And what the ask looks like, again, which is gonna look different than the real numbers once you know everything.
Okay, we'll bring back some
And
scenarios.
everybody's okay with that? Yeah. And we still have a motion on the table. So how do we go about that, Melissa?
I think we vote and the vote is no.
So we can have a roll call on so.
Valentina Hernandez?
No.
Howard Solomon?
No.
Fred Davis?
No.
Dekalb?
No.
Graham Willett?
No.
Victoria Newport?
No.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
Cindy, thank you for all the work you put into this, and we really do appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Can't be impatient.
Yeah.
Okay, next we have new business and administration, 2019, 2020 school calendar.
Yes, in the board packet is the proposed school calendar for next year. Many of us, including BCTA and other memberships, have reviewed it, and it is ready for questions or otherwise. We'll look at it at our next meeting.
Any questions? So if we have a consensus to bring the 2019, 2020 calendar back for people, or
Yes.
okay, next we have request for proposal, RFP, and qualifications for board attorneys and legal services, and this is an action item that the Board of Education approve the law firms recommended by administration to provide legal services to the district as indicated. we have a motion?
So move.
Just real quick, we went through a lot of proposals. We received 15 of them from various different law firms, and it took us some time. Amir did a great job helping out with the process and gathering all the information and kind of creating a rubric for us to make it a little easier for us to make decisions. Of those 15, we brought in 6 firms to interview, and they were all very qualified. There were a couple of larger ones, a couple small ones, a couple medium ones, so we got a pretty good selection of people to interview. And after we interviewed them all, and the selection committee felt that Hodges and Louisi was the best option, and felt that it would work with the district. Also, what we're suggesting is to still maintain Hinshaw to handle our human resources and labor law issues, and Klein Thorpe, who handles our tax appeals and PTABs. Scott Nemick, Amy Delaney is from Hinshaw, Scott Nemick is from Klein Thorpe. And then Nick Beluzzi, who's, who handles all our tips and governmental agreements. So I think it's a good way to kind of have various law firms with some specialties, but then obviously Louisi will handle our general counsel, anything that's not in those buckets, as well as special education and student issues. So that's what we're recommending.
I have a question. But if we wanted to phase out in shop eventually and just, go with the firm that we're looking at, we could potentially do that.
Well, Hodges and Louisi are a big enough firm that if we wanted to use them for other services, absolutely, because they'll still be named as our general counsel.
Okay, so they would be the general counsel.
Pardon me for putting a fine point on it. Amy is really the point person for that specific thing from Hinshaw, is that correct? So basically, because we were doing well with a particular person in that particular firm, we're keeping that particular aspect of Hinshaw, correct?
Yes. And that's pretty typical, because really the firm is one thing, it's the people you work with that are very important, and you're comfortable with them and how they work with you, so that's important.
What happens if someone leaves the firm?
Which one?
Say Hinshaw, say Amy.
Well, we've gone down that path because Scott Nemick used to be with Hinshaw, and Gina was with Hinshaw. So and it's not unusual for school districts to gravitate towards that, the attorneys and the firms that they go to.
And one of the reasons that Hodges and Louisi was attractive to this district is because of that. If, for instance, in one of the other firms that we work with, that they went to another firm or gotten more kind of out of the school business and more into another area, Hodges and Louisi have the ability to pick up that area that we could potentially move.
Where they out? Where they out?
Arlington Heights.
So a little less distance for.
Than Chicago.
Than Chicago. About the same.
I don't know if you mentioned it or not, but how long of a contract do they want with us?
There really isn't I don't think with any of ours, it's just an engagement letter, we can get out of it at any time. So there's no commitment on our part, it's basically.
So not answer for 3 years.
No, it's on a retainer.
No, it's on it's really on the basis of however long we would like to have it in there.
One of the criteria we looked at is their experience in school.
Yes, they're very experienced in school. They actually just had
Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Howard Sullivan,
Yes.
Fred Davis.
Yes.
Jeff Albrecht,
Yes.
Gary Millat,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Valerie Penny Hernandez.
Yes.
Next, we have approval for transition math STEM course proposal. This is an action item. That the Board of Education approve the course proposal for transitional math at Dekalb High School. Do you have a motion?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Fred Davis.
Yes.
Jeff Albrecht,
Yes.
Gary Millat,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Valerie Penny Hernandez,
Yes.
Howard Sullivan.
Yes.
We have approval of AP statistics course proposal. This is an action item. That the Board of Education approve the course proposal for AP statistics at Dekalb High School. Do you have a motion? Discussion? Well, this was an informational. Do you have a question or you want? Okay, all right. Roll call.
Jeff Albrecht,
Yes.
Jim Malat,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez,
Yes.
Howard Solomon,
Yes.
Fred Davis.
Yes.
Next is approval of AP Computer Science, a course proposal. This is an action item that the Board of Education approve the course proposal for AP Computer Science at Dekalb High School. Do we have a motion? Any discussion? Roll call?
Jim Malat,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez,
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
You're speaking for me.
I was reading this.
Howard Solomon,
Yes.
Fred Davis,
Yes.
Jeff Albrecht. Yes.
Sorry.
I agree with you once and now you speak for me.
That one time, Valerie. What the heck?
All right.
Giddy, giddy.
Approval of video production course proposal. This is an action item.
So moved.
That the Board of Education approve the course proposal for video production at Dekalb High School. All right. Roll call.
Valerie Pena Hernandez,
Yes.
Howard Solomon,
Yes.
Fred Davis.
Yes.
Jeff Albrecht,
Yes.
Jim Malat,
Yes.
Victoria Newport.
Yes.
We clearly make these guys here past.
Yeah. Okay, with that, the meeting